The aurora stretched like green fingers across the midnight sky of Nevaeh 9, casting an eerie glow over the vast ice fields that extended to the horizon. In this desolate landscape, Aurora Station stood as humanity's lone outpost, a collection of reinforced modules hunched against the perpetual winter, their exterior lights barely penetrating the swirling snowstorm that had raged for 4 days straight. Inside his cramped sleeping quarters, Captain Marcus Hale stared at the ceiling, listening to the howl of the wind outside. 6 years since he'd left the Marines, and still sleep eluded him most nights. The station's climate control hummed steadily, keeping the ambient temperature at a bearable 15 degrees Celsius. But Marcus knew the truth. Beyond these walls, Nevaeh 9 was currently experiencing temperatures that would freeze human flesh in seconds, minus 87 degrees, and dropping as the 72-hour polar night deepened. "Aurora AI status report," he commanded, his voice echoing in the small room. The station's artificial intelligence responded in its characteristic monotone. Day 4 of projected 6-day blizzard. External temperature minus 87 Celsius. Wind speed 112 kilometers per hour. Station integrity at 98%. No anomalies detected in perimeter sensors. Marcus nodded more to himself than the unseeing AI. Reaching beneath his standard issue cot, he pulled out his thermal sleeping bag, unofficial equipment he'd insisted on bringing despite the station administrator's protests about redundant survival gear. The military-grade cocoon had saved his life twice during operations on Europa, and Marcus wasn't about to trust his life entirely to Aurora Station's backup systems, not this far from civilization. He unrolled the sleeping bag on the floor beside his bed. The material, a composite of synthetic fibers and heat-reflective nanomesh, crinkled beneath his touch. Its deep blue exterior contrasted with the sterile white of the station walls. Marcus ran his fingers along the thermal seam, checking the integrity of the microscopic heating elements woven into the fabric. Satisfied, he activated the power cell. The bag hummed to life, radiating a gentle warmth that immediately eased the perpetual chill that seemed to cling to his bones on this god-forsaken planet. "Just in case," he muttered, returning to his cot. He didn't plan to use the sleeping bag tonight. It was merely a precaution, a security blanket for a man who'd seen too many missions go wrong due to insufficient preparation. As he settled back onto his cot, Marcus's thoughts drifted to the mission that had brought him to this frozen hell. Zephycorp had hired him as an ecological investigator, tasked with assessing the environmental impact of their proposed mining operation. The corporation saw Nevaeh 9 as nothing more than a potential profit center, a pristine source of rare minerals and compounds formed under extreme cold and pressure. Marcus's job was to document the planet's existing ecosystem, assuming anything could survive in this cold, and determine if Zephycorp's operations would disturb some critical balance. It was supposed to be straightforward 2 weeks at Aurora Station daily excursions to collect samples, then a fat paycheck and transport back to the relative comfort of Mars Colony. But as the days had passed, Marcus had grown increasingly uneasy. There was something about the endless ice fields that seemed watching, and the aurora that painted the sky each night didn't behave like any atmospheric phenomenon he'd ever studied. He'd mentioned his concerns during his daily report to Dr. Eliza Frost, the station's senior researcher, but she had dismissed his observations as the product of isolation and the psychological effects of extended darkness. "The human mind seeks patterns," she had explained with the condescending tone of someone speaking to a child. "It's perfectly normal to anthropomorphize natural phenomena when isolated in extreme environments." Perhaps she was right. Perhaps the seemingly deliberate dance of the aurora was nothing more than charged particles interacting with the magnetosphere. Perhaps the ice formations that appeared to shift overnight were simply the result of wind patterns and temperature fluctuations. Perhaps. Marcus closed his eyes, trying to quiet his thoughts. Outside, the storm intensified, rattling the reinforced windows of his quarters. The sound reminded him of artillery fire, distant but threatening, and his mind began drifting back to the Ganymede conflict, to bunkers and blood, and the screams of men and women dying in vacuum when the hull breached. A sharp, rhythmic sound cut through his memories, and the howl of the storm. 3 taps, followed by silence, then 3 more. Marcus sat bolt upright, heart pounding. Had he imagined it? He held his breath, listening intently. The tapping came again, 3 distinct knocks against the exterior door of his quarters. Not the main station entrance, but his personal door that led directly outside the emergency exit that no one ever used. "Aurora AI," he whispered. "Is anyone outside the station?" "Negative, Captain Hale," the AI replied promptly. "All personnel are accounted for within the station. No human life signs detected outside the perimeter." The emphasis on human wasn't lost on Marcus. He swung his legs over the side of the cot and reached for the pulse pistol he kept beneath his pillow, another unofficial piece of equipment he'd smuggled onto the station. "Aurora AI, activate exterior camera my quarters." Exterior cameras are non-functional due to ice accumulation and storm conditions. The AI responded. Of course they were. Nothing could ever be simple. The tapping came again, more insistent this time. 3 knocks, pause, 3 knocks. A deliberate pattern that couldn't be explained by debris in the wind or shifting ice. Marcus moved to the door, pulse pistol raised. His military training screamed that opening the door was a tactical error. Breaking the station's environmental seal during a storm, for an unknown entity, was practically suicidal. But something deeper, more instinctual, told him that whatever was outside needed help. "Aurora AI, prepare emergency resealing protocols for my quarters. Override authorization, Hale 79 Alpha. Warning: opening exterior doors during current weather conditions violates safety protocols. Override requires confirmation." "Confirmed," Marcus snapped. "Authorization, Hale 79 Alpha. Override accepted. Emergency resealing protocols engaged. Captain Hale, I must advise against—" Marcus pressed his palm against the door's unlock panel, cutting off the AI's protest. The security system scanned his biometrics, and with a pneumatic hiss, the door unsealed. A blast of Arctic air immediately rushed into the room, carrying ice crystals that stung Marcus's exposed skin. He squinted against the sudden cold pulse pistol, steady in his grip as the door slid open. For a heartbeat, all he could see was the swirling white of the blizzard. Then a figure collapsed inward, falling face first onto the floor of his quarters. The station's automatic systems engaged, and the door slid shut behind the intruder, sealing the room once more. Marcus kept his weapon trained on the prone figure, as his eyes adjusted to the normal light. It was humanoid, that much was clear, but unlike any human he'd ever seen. The being's skin was a pale bluish gray, almost translucent in places, with intricate patterns that seemed to glow faintly beneath the surface. It was clad in what appeared to be crystalline armor that glinted in the artificial light, though much of it was cracked or missing entirely, revealing a suit of some flexible material underneath. Most striking, however, was the network of luminescent blue markings that ran across what skin was visible. Geometric patterns that reminded Marcus of circuit boards, but with an organic quality that no human technology possessed. The markings pulsed weakly, their glow diminishing with each passing second. In that moment, Marcus made a decision that would change everything. He lowered his weapon. "Aurora AI," he commanded, "medical scan non-human entity." The AI's sensors hummed to life, running a diagnostic beam over the prone figure. Entity appears humanoid, but with significant biological differences. Current state hypothermic and in physical distress, despite apparent adaptation to cold environments. Internal temperature critically low. Evidence of recent trauma. Biological systems failing. Marcus knelt beside the being, holstering his pistol. Up close, he could see that what he'd taken for armor was actually ice formed around the being, as if it were a second skin, but now cracking and falling away. The creature's eyes were closed, its breathing shallow and ragged. "What's the recommended treatment?" he asked, already suspecting the answer. "Insufficient data for species-specific recommendations," the AI replied. However, based on observed physiology, immediate warming is indicated to prevent complete system failure. Marcus glanced at his thermal sleeping bag, still humming softly on the floor. It was his lifeline if the station systems failed, and now, apparently, this strange visitor's only hope as well. With a muttered curse, he gathered the being in his arms. It was lighter than he expected, despite its humanoid size, and cold, so cold that he could feel the chill radiating through his thermal uniform. Working quickly, he unzipped the sleeping bag and carefully placed the mysterious visitor inside. As he was about to seal the bag, the being's eyes fluttered open. They were a startling crystalline blue, like the deepest part of a glacier catching sunlight. Those eyes fixed on Marcus with an intelligence that left no doubt that this was a sentient, thinking being. Human, it whispered in a voice like ice, cracking the words accented, but perfectly understandable. You must let me into the sleeping bag too, the night is very cold. Marcus started at the direct address. You're already in the sleeping bag, he replied, struggling to maintain his composure. I'm trying to warm you up. The being's eyes widened slightly, then narrowed in what might have been confusion. Not enough, it managed, its voice weakening. Need shared heat. Your heat. Like your kind does to survive. Please. Marcus hesitated. Everything about this situation was unprecedented. The being was clearly intelligent, communicative, and in distress, but letting an unknown alien entity into his personal thermal sleeping bag went against every security protocol the station had. If this was some kind of trap. But looking into those crystalline eyes, Marcus saw only desperation and pain. Whatever this being was, whatever had driven it to seek shelter at his door, specifically, it was dying. And Marcus had seen enough death in his lifetime. Aurora AI, continue monitoring the entity's vital signs, he instructed, as he removed his outer uniform, leaving only the thin thermal underlayer. Alert me to any changes, positive or negative. Acknowledged. Be advised, Captain Hale, that direct contact with the entity is not recommended until proper containment and study protocols can be implemented. Station regulations require... Override, Marcus cut in. Authorization Hale 79 Alpha. Record that I am acting under emergency survival protocols. Before the AI could protest further, Marcus slipped into the thermal bag alongside the alien being. The immediate cold that enveloped him made him gasp. It was like embracing an ice sculpture. The markings on the being's skin pulsed weakly, their glow dim but steady. Thank you, the being whispered, its breath forming tiny ice crystals, even within the warmth of the sleeping bag. I am Ilyara, last of the search party. Marcus Hale, he replied, fighting the instinct to pull away from the intense cold. What search party? What are you searching for? But Ilyara's eyes had closed again, consciousness slipping away, as her body began to absorb the warmth from both Marcus and the thermal elements of the sleeping bag. The luminescent markings on her skin began to pulse, more steadily, growing gradually brighter. Marcus lay still, acutely aware of the alien presence beside him. Despite the sleeping bag's heating elements working at maximum capacity, he could feel the cold radiating from Ilyara's body. It was as if she was made of the ice itself, slowly thawing in the artificial warmth. As the minutes passed, Marcus observed subtle changes in Ilyara's appearance. The bluish tinge to her skin began to fade, slightly, replaced by a pearlescent quality that reminded him of opal. The glowing markings beneath her skin pulsed more regularly now, like a heartbeat growing stronger. Most noticeably, the remaining fragments of crystalline ice that had clung to her body were melting, revealing more of the form-fitting suit, underneath a material unlike any fabric Marcus had encountered, with a texture that seemed to shift between solid and liquid as it caught the light. Aurora AI, he whispered, update on the entity's condition. The entity's core temperature is rising gradually, the AI reported. Biological functions stabilizing, though still well outside human norms. Warning: anomalous energy signatures detected within the entity's cellular structure. Recommendation: immediate isolation and containment. Marcus ignored the recommendation. Can you identify the species? Negative. No match in xenobiological database. This appears to be a first contact scenario, Captain Hale. Protocol dictates that you alert Station Command and isolate the entity until proper first contact procedures can be established. Marcus knew the AI was right by regulations. He should have already notified Dr. Frost and had Ilyara moved to the station's medical bay for observation. But something held him back. The desperation in those crystalline eyes, the way she had sought him out specifically. This wasn't a random encounter. And given Zephycorp's reputation for handling biological assets, Marcus wasn't eager to hand Ilyara over until he understood more about the situation. Continue monitoring, he instructed the AI. Maintain privacy protocols. No alerts to other station personnel without my direct authorization. Captain Hale, I must remind you that withholding information regarding potential xenobiological discoveries violates your contract with Zephycorp and Station Regulatory. Override, Marcus snapped. Authorization Hale 79 Alpha. Log that I am conducting preliminary assessment before filing an official report. The AI fell silent, though Marcus could almost feel its disapproval in the sudden adjustment of the room's temperature, a fraction colder than before. Aurora Station's AI had always seemed more vindictive than most he'd encountered. Beside him, Ilyara stirred. Her eyes opened once more, clearer now and more focused. She regarded Marcus with a mixture of caution and curiosity. You are the one, she said, her voice stronger than before, though still carrying that strange crystalline quality. The warrior who walks with shadows in his mind. Marcus tensed. How do you know that? Ilyara lifted a hand slowly, non-threateningly, and gestured toward her temple. The cold gods grant visions. I saw you nights ago when the lights danced in the sky. A warrior who has seen death, but chooses life. A protector who has forgotten what he protects. Her gaze intensified. The others did not believe a human would help. They sought the great machines instead. But I knew. Marcus felt a chill that had nothing to do with the physical cold. What others? What are you doing on Nevaeus 9? Ilyara's expression darkened. We are the guardians of the Ice Soul. For millennia, we have protected the sacred places, the worlds where the essence of cold burns brightest. Your kind calls this world Nevaeus 9. We call it Kyrath Frozen Heart, the strongest of the cold worlds. She paused, wincing slightly, as she shifted position. The movement caused the glowing markings beneath her skin to flare briefly, illuminating the interior of the sleeping bag with an ethereal blue light. The sky dancers, what you call aurora, they are not natural, she continued. They are warnings. The cold gods are disturbed. The balance shifts. She fixed Marcus with an intense stare. Your kind drills into the sacred ice. Metal machines tear at the frozen soul of this world. The cold gods wake and tremble. Zephycorp, Marcus muttered. Their mining operation. Ilyara nodded solemnly. We came to warn, to show the danger. But those who lead the metal machines, they saw us, hunted us. Her voice cracked slightly. My kin, they are taken, or worse. I alone escaped following the vision that led to you. Marcus's mind raced. If what Ilyara was saying was true, then Zephycorp wasn't just conducting initial surveys as they'd claimed. They were already extracting resources, and apparently had encountered and captured members of Ilyara's species in the process. None of this had been included in his mission briefing. These markings, he said, gesturing to the luminescent patterns on her skin. What are they? Runic bonding. Ilyara replied, a note of pride entering her voice. The language of ice and cold, written into flesh. They connect us to the cold gods, to the ice soul of the world. She touched one of the brighter patterns near her collarbone. This one speaks to water and flow. This, she indicated another on her forearm, to stillness and preservation. Together, They form a harmony that maintains balance. As if to demonstrate, she focused on the marking on her forearm. The luminescent lines brightened, and Marcus felt the temperature around them drop noticeably, even within the insulated sleeping bag. Frost began to form on the interior fabric near her hand. "That's remarkable," Marcus breathed genuine wonder momentarily, overriding his caution. "You can control temperature." "Not control," Ilyara corrected gently. "Commune with. Speak to. The cold listens when we honor it properly." She released her focus, and the marking dimmed, the temperature stabilizing. "But my connection weakens away from the sacred ice. The hunters, they know this. They seek to take the runic knowledge to use it without understanding, without balance." Marcus frowned. "These hunters? You mean Zephycorp personnel?" Ilyara's expression hardened. "Men in black armor with weapons that burn and freeze at once. They follow the order of one called Director. They take my kin to the great dark ship that hangs above the storms. An orbital facility." Zephycorp had mentioned nothing about maintaining a spacecraft in Niveus 9's orbit. The corporation had claimed this was merely a preliminary survey mission, ecological assessment, before potential future mining. But if they already had an orbital facility dedicated to the operation— "How long have your people been on Niveus 9? Marcus asked. "Always," Ilyara replied simply. "Since the cold gods froze the waters and sang the ice into being. We are the guardians. We are few but eternal." "And you've been hidden all this time? How have previous expeditions not detected you?" Ilyara smiled faintly. "Your instruments see what they are made to see. Heat radiation movement. We are children of ice. We move between these things in the spaces your science does not measure." The smile faded. "But the new machines. They disturb the deep ice. They awaken energies that reveal us. And now the hunters have found our sacred places." A sudden alert chime from the room's communication system interrupted them. "Captain Hale," Aurora AI announced, "incoming transmission from Director Voss of Zephycorp. Priority Alpha." Marcus tensed. Director Wesley Voss was the corporate overseer of the Niveus 9 operation, a man Marcus had met only once during his initial briefing on Mars. Voss was typical corporate military, former Earth Defense Force, now serving corporate interests with the same calculated precision he had once applied to planetary security. "Tell him I'm conducting field analysis and will return his communication within the hour," Marcus replied, buying time. "Director Voss has coded this communication as emergency override," the AI responded. "Station protocols require immediate acknowledgement." Marcus cursed under his breath. "Audio only," he instructed, then whispered to Ilyara, "Stay silent, don't move." The communication system chimed again, and Director Voss's clipped, authoritative voice filled the room. "Captain Hale, your daily ecological reports have been interesting reading, particularly your observations regarding atmospheric anomalies and ice formation patterns." Marcus kept his voice neutral. "Just doing my job, Director, documenting everything I observe." "Indeed," Voss replied, a hint of something cold entering his tone. "However, your most recent excursion data included some unusual energy signatures. Signatures that align with phenomena we've been tracking independently." Beside him, Marcus felt Ilyara tense. The markings on her skin dimmed noticeably, as if she were consciously suppressing their glow. "Nothing unusual in my experience," Marcus lied smoothly. "Just standard atmospheric readings affected by the storm." There was a pause before Voss continued. "Perhaps. Nevertheless, I'm dispatching a specialized research team to your location. They'll arrive within 6 hours, weather permitting, to conduct a more thorough analysis of these anomalies." 6 hours. The storm was projected to last another 2 days at least. For a specialized team to attempt landing during these conditions, whatever they were seeking must be valuable indeed. "With all due respect, Director Aurora Station is currently locked down due to extreme weather conditions. Standard protocol prohibits incoming or outgoing expeditions until the storm abates." These researchers have equipment specifically designed for extreme conditions, Captain Hale. They'll manage. Voss's tone left no room for argument. I expect your full cooperation when they arrive. They'll be operating under my direct authority. Understood, Marcus replied, keeping his voice even despite the alarm bells ringing in his mind. Will there be anything else, Director? Just one thing, Voss said, his voice suddenly silky with menace. Our perimeter sensors detected an anomalous thermal signature approaching Aurora Station approximately 3 hours ago. The signature disappeared near your quarters. I don't suppose you've noticed anything unusual, have you, Captain? Marcus's heart pounded, but years of military training kept his voice steady. Nothing beyond the storm, Director. If your sensors detected something, it was probably just debris carried by the wind. The conditions out there are extreme. Of course, Voss replied, clearly unconvinced. Well, if you do encounter anything unexpected, Captain, I trust you'll remember the non-disclosure and biosecurity clauses of your contract. Corporate interests must be protected. Always my first priority, Marcus lied. See that it remains so. Voss out. The communication ended, leaving the room in tense silence. Marcus let out a long breath, then looked at Ilyara, whose expression had grown grave. The hunters come, she said simply. Yes, Marcus agreed. And we have 6 hours to figure out what to do before they arrive. Ilyara's crystalline eyes searched his face. You lied to protect me. Why? It was a fair question, one Marcus had been asking himself, since the moment he'd pulled Ilyara into his quarters. Why risk his career, possibly his freedom, for an alien being he'd just met? The professional answer was that she represented an indigenous sentient species, entitled to protection under interstellar legal protocols that superseded corporate interests. The personal answer was more complicated. Because something doesn't add up, he finally said. Zephycorp told me this was a simple ecological survey mission. No mention of an orbital facility, specialized research teams, or, he gestured toward her, indigenous intelligent life. They're hiding something, and I don't like being used as an unwitting accomplice. It wasn't the whole truth, but it was enough for now. The rest, the instinctive trust he felt, the strange connection that was harder to articulate even to himself. Ilyara nodded slowly. The cold gods guided me truly, she said. You are honorable. She attempted to sit up, wincing with the effort. I must recover my strength. My kin, they suffer while I hide here. You're in no condition to help anyone right now, Marcus said firmly, placing a restraining hand on her shoulder. The contact sent an odd sensation up his arm, not painful, but intensely cold, and somehow electric, as if the glowing markings on her skin carried a current. Tell me more about these hunters. What exactly are they after? Ilyara settled back, her expression troubled. They seek the power of the runics, the living connection between Guardian and Cold God. They take my kin, study their markings, attempt to extract the knowledge. Her voice grew haunted. But the runic bonds cannot be taken, only given or earned. Without proper communion, they wither and die, and the Guardian with them. They're experimenting on your people, Marcus translated grimly. Yes. And worse, they drill into the sacred ice, into the veins of the world, where the cold gods sleep. They seek the source of our power, the crystalline heart that beats beneath the surface. Ilyara's markings pulsed with evident distress. If they disturb the deepest ice, the balance fails. The cold gods will wake in anger, not harmony. And what happens then? Ilyara's eyes met his, solemn and ancient. The world remembers it as ice. All becomes stillness. Even the stars above would feel the reach of such cold. The implications were clear enough. Ecological disaster on a planetary scale, perhaps beyond. Whether her explanation involved actual deities, or was simply her culture's way of understanding natural forces, didn't matter. Something catastrophic would happen if Zephycorp continued its operations. Marcus made a decision. We need to move, he said, beginning to extricate himself from the sleeping bag. If Voss's team is coming, this is the first place they'll look. We need to gather supplies and find somewhere to hide until you're strong enough to travel. Ilyara caught his wrist, her touch still unnaturally cold. The storm grows. No guardian walks alone in such weather. Her expression turned grave. And the hunters have devices that see our runic signatures. They will find me wherever I hide within this metal shell. Then we don't hide inside the station, Marcus replied, already formulating a plan. Aurora AI, what's the status of Research Outpost Beta? The AI responded promptly. Research Outpost Beta is currently unoccupied. Primary systems in standby mode. External temperature at outpost location -91 and falling. Blizzard conditions severe. Perfect. Outpost Beta was a smaller facility, 2 kilometers east of the main station, a forward research post Marcus had used for several of his ecological surveys. It was connected to Aurora Station by a service tunnel, which meant they could reach it without exposing themselves to the full fury of the storm. More importantly, it had independent systems that weren't directly monitored by the main station's AI. We'll go there, he decided. I can reset the systems to run on minimal power. Nothing that would show up on the station's grid monitors. It should buy us time. The cold between stations will weaken me further, Ilyara warned. My strength returns slowly, and only when connected to the sacred ice or... She hesitated, to a compatible life force. Marcus raised an eyebrow. Compatible life force? Some humans, few resonate with the cold god's song. You are one. She gestured to where his hand had touched her shoulder, where a faint luminescence now lingered on his skin. The runics recognize you. With permission and proper communion, I could draw strength from your life force not to diminish you, but to create harmony between us. You want what bond with me? A temporary bridge, Ilyara clarified. It would help me heal faster, and in return grant you some measure of resilience against the cold. We would be connected thoughts and sensations shared to some degree, until the bond is severed. Marcus hesitated. Every rational part of his military training screamed that allowing an alien entity access to his life force, whatever that actually meant in scientific terms, was beyond reckless. But his options were limited, and time was running short. What exactly does this involve? He asked cautiously. Palm to marking, Ilyara explained, indicating a circular pattern over her heart. Intention and acceptance. The cold gods judge worthiness. It sounded mystical rather than scientific, but Marcus had seen enough strange phenomena across the galaxy to know that sufficiently advanced biological adaptations often appeared like magic to the uninitiated. And he'd already witnessed Ilyara's ability to manipulate temperature through her runic markings. All right, he agreed, though not without reservation. But if I feel anything dangerous happening, we stop immediately. Understood. Ilyara nodded solemnly. The bond honors both participants or exists not at all. Marcus took a deep breath and placed his palm over the circular marking on Ilyara's chest. Immediately, an intense cold shot through his arm, not painful, but shocking in its purity. The marking beneath his hand flared with brilliant blue light, and suddenly, Marcus's perception shifted. He was still in his quarters, still kneeling beside Ilyara, but he could also somehow perceive the ice fields beyond the station walls. He could feel the storm, not as a threat, but as a complex dance of wind and crystal and vapor. Most strangely, he could sense Ilyara's presence in his mind, not invasive, but there like a harmony accompanying his own thoughts. I am here, her consciousness seemed to say, though no words were spoken aloud. We are bridged by the cold god's blessing. Marcus pulled his hand away, breaking the direct contact, but the connection remained muted, but present. He stared at his palm, where a faint outline of the circular marking now shimmered on his skin, before slowly fading. What did you do to me? He asked, more curious than accusatory. Shared truth, Ilyara replied simply. The cold gods recognize your spirit and grant you partial sight. It will fade when our paths diverge. Before Marcus could question her further, a new alert sounded different from the communication chime. This was the high-pitched warning of a perimeter breach. Captain Hale, Aurora AI announced unidentified aircraft approaching from north-northwest. Craft does not match Zephycorp registry. Current flight pattern suggests reconnaissance protocol. Marcus moved to the small viewport in his quarters. Through the swirling snow, he could just make out a sleek, dark shape cutting through the storm, a stealth craft designed for atmospheric operation in extreme conditions. Its matte black surface absorbed, rather than reflected light, and its engines emitted no visible exhaust. Military spec, he muttered, recognizing the design. Zephycorp's private security forces. The hunters, Ilyara confirmed, her voice tight with fear and anger. They track the runic signature. Marcus's mind raced. Their timeline had just collapsed from hours to minutes. Change of plans, he said decisively. We're leaving now. Can you walk? Ilyara nodded, though her expression betrayed uncertainty. The bond gives strength, but movement will be difficult. Then, I'll help you. Marcus quickly pulled on his extreme weather gear, a reinforced exosuit designed for Niveus 9's harsh conditions. From a hidden compartment in his equipment locker, he retrieved additional items he'd kept concealed from the station inventory, a tactical combat suit enhanced with ballistic mesh and thermal masking, an expanded medical kit containing treatments not approved by colonial authorities, and most importantly, a second pulse pistol with expanded energy cells. As he armed himself, Marcus outlined the situation to Ilyara. That craft is carrying Zephycorp's elite security team, former military, armed with cutting-edge weapons, and trained to capture high-value assets. They wouldn't be here unless Voss was absolutely certain you were at this station. The director hunts all guardians, Ilyara said grimly. He believes our runics can be weaponized, turned into tools of destruction and control. Can they? Ilyara's expression darkened. The cold god's gifts are for harmony and preservation. But yes, like all power, they can be twisted. That is why we guardians undergo lifetimes of training before receiving our first marking. She gestured to the smallest of her runic patterns, a simple line across her wrist. This alone took 15 cycles of preparation. The station shuddered suddenly as a blast of wind struck it with unusual force. The lights flickered momentarily before stabilizing. Captain Hale, Aurora AI interjected. The approaching aircraft has initiated a landing sequence at the main docking bay. Station protocols require your presence as senior ecological officer to receive unscheduled visitors. Override, Marcus snapped. Authorization Hale 79 Alpha. Initiate privacy lockdown on my quarters and erase all surveillance records from the past 6 hours. That action requires director-level authorization, the AI replied coolly. Marcus cursed under his breath. He'd expected resistance from the station systems. Fine. Then lock my quarters under biohazard protocol. Authorization Hale 79 Alpha, ecological contamination containment. This, at least, was within his authority as the station's ecological officer. The AI paused briefly, then responded, Biohazard lockdown initiated. Warning. This protocol will automatically alert all station personnel of potential contamination. Understood, Marcus replied, knowing it would buy them precious minutes, as the security team would need to don protective gear before attempting to breach his quarters. Now, route all external camera feeds to my personal terminal. The wall screen activated, displaying multiple views of Aurora Station's exterior. On the main landing pad, the black aircraft was touching down its sleek form, nearly invisible against the dark storm, except where swirling snow outlined its contours. The craft was smaller than standard personnel carriers, likely accommodating no more than 6 operatives plus pilot. 7 maximum, Marcus murmured, assessing the threat. Probably 5 combat-ready personnel. Too many, Ilyara said, her voice gaining strength as she rose unsteadily to her feet. The runic markings across her body pulsed more vigorously now, their blue light casting eerie shadows around the room. But we have advantages they do not expect. Marcus raised an eyebrow. Such as? In response, Ilyara pressed her palm against the wall of the quarters. Immediately, the temperature in the room plummeted. Frost spread outward from her touch, coating the metal surface in intricate crystalline patterns. As the patterns expanded, they began to glow with the same ethereal blue light as her runic markings. "The station speaks to me," she explained, her voice taking on a resonant quality that seemed to vibrate in Marcus's bones. "Metal and ice, not so different when the cold is deep enough. I can confuse their instruments, hide our heat signatures." Marcus watched in amazement as the frost patterns continued to spread, following what appeared to be the station's power conduits and sensor arrays hidden within the walls. Where the patterns touched monitoring devices, the lights on those devices flickered and dimmed. "Impressive," he admitted. "But we still need to move. Once they realize my quarters are under lockdown, they'll override it with Voss's authority codes." He quickly gathered essential supplies, emergency rations, medical supplies, communication devices, and most crucially, his thermal sleeping bag. The latter, he compressed into a portable package, securing it to his backpack. "Ready?" he asked, moving to the maintenance hatch in the floor of his quarters, an access point to the station's utility tunnels that wasn't indicated on the standard station schematics. Ilyara nodded, though she swayed slightly with the effort of maintaining the frost pattern. As she stepped away from the wall, Marcus noticed that the crystalline formations remained slowly pulsing with a life of their own. "They will linger for a time," she said, noting his observation. "But we must hurry. The bond between us strengthens me, but moving through metal corridors separates me from the sacred ice. My power wanes in such places." Marcus lifted the hatch, revealing a narrow tunnel, bathed in dim emergency lighting. It was tight quarters, barely wide enough for one person to crawl through, but it would take them directly to the central hub, without exposing them to the main corridors, where they might encounter the security team. "I'll go first," he said, dropping into the opening. "Stay close behind me." The tunnel was colder than the living quarters its temperature regulated, only to prevent the station's pipes and wiring from freezing, rather than for human comfort. For Marcus, even in his thermal gear, it was uncomfortably cold. For Ilyara, however, the lower temperature seemed to have a revitalizing effect. Her runic markings glowed more vibrantly, and her movements became more fluid. They crawled through the narrow space for several minutes, Marcus navigating by memory from his study of the station schematics, a habit from his military days that had served him well over the years. Finally, they reached a junction where the tunnel widened enough for them to sit up. "Wait," Marcus whispered, pressing a finger to his earpiece. Through the small device, he could hear the station's internal communications. Breach the containment lock on Captain Hale's quarters," a voice was saying. The tone was crisp, professional military discipline. "Director Voss has provided override codes. Jensen Nakamura, take point. Chemical restraints, only the target is to be captured intact. Dr. Wade is very specific about his requirements." "Understood, Commander. Breaching in 3, 2, 1. There was a hiss of decompression followed by silence. Then, "Quarters empty, Commander. But there's some kind of frost pattern on the walls. Never seen anything like it." "Don't touch it," the commander ordered sharply. "Thermal imaging now. Find me a trail." Marcus exchanged a glance with Ilyara. Her frost manipulation had disrupted the standard monitoring systems, but dedicated thermal imaging would eventually pick up their trail, however faint. "We need to move faster," he murmured. "The central hub is 30 meters ahead. From there, we can access the service tunnel to Outpost Beta." They resumed their crawl, moving with greater urgency now. The bond between them was having unexpected effects on Marcus. He found himself increasingly sensitive to the subtle variations in temperature throughout the station, aware of the flow of heat in a way he'd never experienced before. Through this new awareness, he could sense the security team's movements, hot spots of human warmth, navigating the cold corridors of the station, spreading outward in a search pattern from his quarters. When they finally reached the access panel to the central hub, Marcus paused his enhanced senses, detecting human presence in the chamber beyond. "2 of them," he whispered to Ilyara. "Guarding the hub as I expected. We'll need a distraction." Ilyara closed her eyes, her runic markings intensifying. "The cold flows through all things," she murmured. "It can be guided, directed." She touched the wall of the tunnel, and again frost spread from her fingers, but this time, instead of expanding outward, the crystalline patterns flowed through the metal in a specific direction, following Marcus's pointed guidance toward the far side of the hub. Through their bond, Marcus could sense what she was doing, creating a localized cold spot that would register on the guard's sensors as a possible target. Sure enough, within moments he heard movement in the hub. "Thermal anomaly detected in Section 5, one of the guards reported. "Possible contact." "Check it out," came the response. "I'll maintain position here." Footsteps moved away, but one guard remained. Marcus drew his pulse pistol, adjusting the settings to stun. "Wait," Ilyara whispered, placing a hand on his arm. "There is another way." Before he could question her, she pressed both palms against the tunnel wall, her entire body tensing with effort. The runic markings across her skin flared brilliantly, and Marcus felt a surge of cold energy flow through their bond. In the hub beyond, there was a sudden cracking sound followed by a startled exclamation, and then silence. When Marcus peered through a small vent in the access panel, he saw the remaining guard standing perfectly still, encased in a thin layer of sparkling frost. The man wasn't frozen solid. Marcus could see his chest rising and falling slowly, but he appeared to be in some kind of suspended state, unable to move or speak. "He is in cold sleep," Ilyara explained, her voice strained from the effort. "It will hold for minutes only, and does him no lasting harm. Hurry." Marcus pushed open the access panel and climbed into the hub, helping Ilyara through after him. The frost-covered guard didn't respond as they moved past him, toward the service tunnel entrance, on the opposite side of the circular chamber. Marcus paused only long enough to retrieve the guard's communication device and weapon, a sleek silver pistol that looked like no standard-issue firearm he'd ever seen. "Energy weapon," he noted, examining it briefly before securing it in his pack. "Advanced tech military grade. Definitely not standard corporate security." The service tunnel leading to Outpost Beta was larger than the maintenance shaft they'd just navigated, designed for equipment transport, rather than just utilities. They could move at a crouched run, rather than a crawl, which increased their pace considerably. Even so, Marcus knew they were in a race against time. The guard in cold sleep would be discovered, and once the security team realized their targets were heading for the outpost, they would undoubtedly move to cut them off. They had covered perhaps half the distance to the outpost when a violent tremor shook the tunnel, nearly knocking them off their feet. Dust and small fragments of ice rained down from the ceiling. "What was that?" Marcus gasped, steadying himself against the wall. Ilyara's expression had turned grave. They disturbed the deep ice. The drills reached toward the sacred places. Her runic markings pulsed erratically, as if responding to some distant call. The cold gods stir in their sleep. Before Marcus could question her further, his stolen communication device crackled to life. "All units be advised. Seismic activity detected at drilling site Omega. Director Voss has ordered acceleration of the extraction timeline. Primary target is now confirmed to be moving through Service Tunnel Alpha 3 toward Research Outpost Beta. Henderson Travis move to intercept. Use non-lethal force only. The subject's biological material must remain viable." Marcus switched off the device with a curse. "They know where we're heading. We need a new plan." Ilyara looked at him steadily, her crystalline blue eyes reflecting the dim emergency lights of the tunnel. "No, we continue as intended. But now we must prepare for confrontation. There are at least 5 of them, all armed with advanced weapons and trained for combat," Marcus pointed out. "Even with my military experience and your abilities, those aren't good odds." "Numbers matter less than connection to the sacred ice," Ilyara replied enigmatically. "And we approach a place of power." Marcus was about to press for clarification when another tremor, stronger than the first, rocked the tunnel. This time, a section of the floor fractured, revealing not the expected infrastructure beneath, but a shimmering blue-white surface that pulsed with light, similar to Ilyara's markings. She gasped, dropping to her knees beside the exposed area. "A vein of the world heart," she whispered reverently. "The sacred ice reveals itself to us." Marcus knelt beside her, curiosity overcoming caution. The exposed surface wasn't simply ice. It seemed to flow like liquid while maintaining solid form, and pulses of blue-white energy moved through it in rhythmic waves. It was unlike anything he'd encountered in his years of exploring strange worlds. "What is it?" "The lifeblood of cold worlds," Ilyara explained carefully, touching the surface. Where her fingers made contact, the pulsing light intensified. "What your kind might call a naturally occurring quantum state of matter, neither solid, nor liquid, nor gas, but all, and none. We call it the ice soul." Her expression became troubled. "The drilling disrupts its flow, threatens its harmony. If the balance is broken—" Another violent tremor interrupted her, this one strong enough to split the tunnel wall. Through the new opening, Marcus could see not the expected bedrock of Nevaeus 9, but a vast, cathedral-like cavern that stretched beyond sight. The walls of the cavern were composed entirely of the same flowing, luminescent material, a network of blue-white veins that pulsed in complex, seemingly deliberate patterns. In the center of the visible portion hung suspended crystals, each the size of a human, glowing with intense inner light. Ilyara's reaction was one of both awe and alarm. "The inner sanctum," she breathed. "One of the sacred chambers where the cold gods commune with the world." She turned to Marcus, her expression urgent. "The veil between worlds thins. This is not natural. The drilling breaches sacred boundaries. We must hurry." Marcus nodded, helping her to her feet. The revelation of the cavern had changed his understanding of the situation dramatically. This wasn't simply about corporate overreach or exploitation of indigenous people, though those were certainly factors. What Zephycorp was doing threatened something far more fundamental to Nevaeus 9's existence. They continued down the tunnel at a faster pace, both driven by the urgency of their situation. The tremors continued increasing in both frequency and intensity, and more cracks appeared in the walls and floor, each revealing glimpses of the luminescent network that apparently ran throughout the planet's crust. Finally, they reached the end of the service tunnel, where a heavy metal door separated them from Outpost Beta. Marcus approached the control panel, entering his access code, but the system remained unresponsive. "Remote lockdown," he muttered. "The security team is ahead of us." "Stand aside," Ilyara said, her voice taking on that resonant quality again. She placed both palms against the door, and her entire body began to glow with runic energy. The light flowed from her markings into the metal of the door, forming crystalline patterns that spread rapidly across its surface. There was a sound like cracking ice, and then the door shattered, not into metal fragments, but into tiny ice crystals that fell harmlessly to the floor. Beyond lay Outpost Beta, a single large chamber filled with research equipment, monitoring stations, and basic living facilities. And standing in the center of the room, pulse rifles raised and ready, were two members of Zephycorp's security team. "Don't move," ordered the taller of the two, a man with close-cropped dark hair and the hard eyes of a veteran soldier. "Hands where we can see them. The alien comes with us, Corporation orders." Marcus raised his hands slowly, mentally calculating angles and distances. His pulse pistol was holstered at his hip, but he'd never reach it before the guards could fire. Beside him, he could feel Ilyara drawing on their bond, pulling energy through the connection they shared, but she was still weakened from her ordeal and the exertion of shattering the door. "You don't understand what's happening here," Marcus said, trying to buy time. "The drilling operation is destabilizing something fundamental to this planet's structure. Those tremors you're feeling, they're just the beginning." "Not our concern," the guard replied dismissively. "We have our orders. Director Voss wants the alien specimen, and we're going to deliver." "I am not specimen." Ilyara said, her voice cutting through the tension like a blade of ice. I am Guardian, and you trespass on sacred ground. The second guard, a shorter, stockier woman with a facial scar that suggested previous combat experience, laughed mirthlessly. Sacred ground. This is a corporate mining operation, not a religious retreat. Stand down and come quietly, or we'll use chemical restraints. Your choice. Another tremor shook the outpost, this one strong enough to knock equipment from shelves and cause the guards to momentarily brace themselves for balance. In that instant of distraction, Marcus made his move. He dropped to one knee, drawing his pulse pistol, in a fluid motion that spoke of years of combat experience. But instead of firing at the guards, he targeted the central power junction on the far wall. The pulse blast struck with perfect precision, plunging the outpost into darkness, except for the emergency lights and the ethereal glow of Ilyara's runic markings. Chaos erupted in the darkened space. The guards fired blindly, their energy weapons sending sizzling bolts of blue-white light through the air. Marcus rolled to the side, taking cover behind a research console, then fired two more carefully aimed shots, one disabling the female guard's weapon, the other striking the male guard's shoulder, sending him spinning to the floor. Ilyara, meanwhile, had pressed her hands to the floor of the outpost. The temperature in the room plummeted instantly, and frost raced across the ground toward the female guard. Before she could react, the frost encased her boots, anchoring her in place. She cried out in surprise and pain, dropping her disabled weapon as the cold climbed rapidly up her legs. "Stop!" she gasped. "What is this?" "Cold sleep," Ilyara replied, her voice echoing strangely in the frigid air. "Be grateful for mercy." The male guard, recovering from Marcus's shot, reached for a device on his belt, some kind of backup weapon or communicator. Marcus launched himself across the space between them, tackling the man before he could activate whatever it was. They grappled briefly, but Marcus's combat training proved superior. A precise strike to the guard's temple rendered him unconscious. Marcus rose, breathing heavily, and surveyed the scene. The female guard was now encased to her waist in the same crystalline frost that had immobilized the guard at the central hub. Her expression was one of terrified fascination as she stared at Ilyara, whose runic markings were now pulsing with renewed vigor. "You should not have come to this world," Ilyara told the guard, genuine regret in her voice. "Your leaders do not understand what they disturb. The consequences will reach beyond this ice, beyond your corporation's concerns." Another tremor, the strongest yet, shook the outpost. Cracks appeared in the floor, revealing more of the luminescent material beneath the veins of what Ilyara had called the ice soul. Through their bond, Marcus could feel something building, a pressure in the fabric of reality itself, centered deep beneath the ice, but rapidly rising toward the surface. "What's happening?" he asked, moving to Ilyara's side. "The cold gods wake," she replied grimly. "The drilling has pierced the deepest chamber, where the heart of ice beats. The gods rise in defense of their domain." She looked at him, and in her crystalline eyes, Marcus saw genuine fear. "If they fully awaken, all warmth on this world will cease. The cold will reach absolute beyond what even my kind can endure." "Can you stop it?" Ilyara hesitated. "Not alone. The balance requires both cold and warmth in harmony. I can speak to the ice, but without a counterbalance." She trailed off, then looked at him with sudden intensity. "The bond between us, it could be deepened. Together, we might reach the heart, soothe the god's anger." "What would that entail?" Marcus asked, though a part of him already knew, could feel it through the tentative connection they already shared. "Complete communion," Ilyara said softly. "Mind to mind, spirit to spirit. The cold gods would see us as one entity, both guardian and outsider, both ice and warmth. It would give us the authority to negotiate." The implications were staggering. Marcus had heard tales of alien species capable of deep mental bonding, but had always dismissed them as exaggerations or misinterpretations of more mundane biological phenomena. Yet, the evidence was undeniable. The connection he already shared with Ilyara had given him awareness beyond his normal senses, had changed his perception of the world around him. Before he could respond, the communication device he'd taken from the guard crackled to life. "Henderson Travis report status," came the commander's voice. When no response followed, he continued. "All units converge on Outpost Beta. Director Voss is personally taking command of this operation. The drilling team reports unprecedented energy readings from the extraction site. Priority is capture of the alien specimen and Captain Hale alive and intact." The sudden mention of his name gave Marcus pause. "They're targeting both of us now," he noted. "Voss must have figured out we're connected somehow." "The runic bond leaves traces," Ilyara confirmed. "Your life energy now bears the mark of the cold god's blessing. To those who know how to look, it shines like a beacon." Another tremor shook the outpost strong enough to topple shelving units and crack support beams. A warning klaxon began to sound the station's automated systems, detecting structural compromise. "We don't have much time," Marcus said decisively. "This connection, this deeper bond, will it be permanent?" Ilyara shook her head. "No bond endures unchanged. When the cold gods are appeased and balance restored, the connection will naturally diminish to a more sustainable level. We would retain awareness of each other, but not the deep communion needed to speak to the heart." Marcus weighed his options quickly. The security team was closing in. The planet itself seemed to be tearing apart around them. And through it all, he felt a strange certainty that this moment, this decision was why he had been drawn to Nevaeh 9 in the first place. Not for Zephycorp's ecological survey, but for this encounter, this choice. "Do it," he said finally. "Deepen the bond. Let's try to fix this mess." Ilyara's expression was solemn, but tinged with hope. "Kneel with me," she instructed, dropping gracefully to the cracked floor of the outpost. "Place your hands on mine, palms to palms." Marcus complied, kneeling opposite her, on the increasingly unstable floor. He placed his palms against hers and immediately felt that now familiar cold energy flow between them, but stronger, more focused. Ilyara's runic markings began to glow with intense light, and to Marcus's astonishment, faint echoes of those same patterns became visible on his own skin, shimmering just beneath the surface. "Open your mind," Ilyara whispered. "Do not resist the cold. Embrace it as part of yourself, as I embrace your warmth as part of me." Marcus took a deep breath and let his mental barriers drop. Instantly, the connection between them expanded exponentially. He was still himself, still Marcus Hale with all his memories and identity intact, but he was also somehow Ilyara could feel her thoughts. Her emotions, her understanding of the world flow through him like a glacier's meltwater. Through her perception, he suddenly comprehended the true nature of Nevaeh 9. The planet wasn't simply a frozen world. It was a sentient entity of sorts, a complex system of energy and matter that had evolved consciousness over billions of years. What Ilyara called the cold gods were focal points of this consciousness, concentrated in crystalline structures deep beneath the surface. The guardians like Ilyara had evolved alongside these entities, developing a symbiotic relationship that allowed communication and harmony between the world's consciousness and the organic life that had developed on its surface. And now, through Marcus, Ilyara was experiencing the warmth of human consciousness, the rapid, adaptable thinking, the emotional complexity, the innate drive to connect and understand. Together, they formed something new, a bridge between two fundamentally different forms of existence. "We must go deeper." Ilyara's thoughts flowed into his. To the heart itself. With their minds and perceptions united, they reached downward through the cracked floor of the outpost, through the luminescent veins of the ice soul, following the network deeper and deeper toward the planet's core. As they descended, the tremors that shook the physical world seemed distant, less important than the journey they were undertaking on this other level of reality. Finally, they reached it, the heart of ice, a vast crystalline chamber at Nevaeh 9's core. Here, the luminescence was blinding, pulsing, with a rhythm that matched no human understanding of time. And within this light there were presences. entities of pure cold energy, ancient beyond comprehension, stirring from eons of harmonious slumber into confused anger at the disruption caused by Zephycorp's drilling operation. Through their unified consciousness, Marcus and Ilyara communicated with these entities, not with words or even thoughts as humans would understand them, but with patterns of energy and intention. They explained, they soothed, they promised balance would be restored. The drilling would stop. The sacred places would be protected. In response, the entity's agitation gradually calmed. The violent pulses of energy that had been causing the tremors began to stabilize. But there was a condition to this renewed harmony. The intruders, the warmth bringers who had violated the sacred ice, must leave. And the guardians must reclaim their role as protectors. We understand. Marcus and Ilyara communicated as one. Balance will be restored. As they began their ascent back to the physical realm, they became aware of new presences in the outpost above. The remaining members of the security team had arrived, including Director Voss himself. Through the enhanced perception granted by their bond, they could sense the director's cold determination, his ruthless focus on acquiring the specimen, regardless of the consequences. Time to return, Ilyara whispered, her physical voice, breaking the deep silence of their communion. Marcus blinked, the outpost swimming back into focus around them. Their hands were still pressed together, palms to palms, and both of their bodies now shimmered with runic light, his a more subdued echo of her brilliant patterns. On the floor around them, the luminescent material had risen through the cracks, forming a perfect circle that pulsed in rhythm with their shared heartbeat. And standing at the outpost entrance, surrounded by armed guards, was Director Wesley Voss, a tall, lean man with silver hair and eyes like chips of slate. His expression, as he regarded the kneeling pair, was one of clinical interest rather than anger or surprise. "Fascinating," he said, his voice cultured and precise. Dr. Wade's theories appear to be correct. The indigenous entity can indeed transfer its properties to human hosts through some kind of energy exchange. He stepped forward, unmindful of the tremors that still occasionally shook the outpost. "Captain Hale, I'm disappointed but not surprised by your betrayal. Military types often form irrational attachments to their subjects of study." Marcus rose smoothly to his feet, helping Ilyara up beside him. Through their bond, he could sense her gathering strength from both their connection and the luminescent material that now surrounded them, like a protective circle. "This isn't about attachment, Voss," he replied evenly. "It's about preventing an ecological catastrophe that your drilling operation has nearly triggered. Surely even Zephycorp doesn't want to be responsible for destroying an entire planet." Voss smiled thinly. "Catastrophe is such a dramatic term, Captain. We prefer to think of it as forceful negotiation with the natural environment." He gestured to the runic patterns, now visible on Marcus's skin. "What you've experienced is exactly what we hope to achieve through our research program. The indigenous entities possess remarkable abilities to manipulate matter at the quantum level, abilities that could revolutionize energy production, weapons, development, even human enhancement. And now, you've provided a working demonstration of human compatibility." "You don't understand what you're dealing with," Marcus warned. "This planet is alive, conscious in ways we barely comprehend. The entities, as you call them, are part of a complex system that maintains this world's balance. Disrupt that balance too far, and the entire planet will shift to a state of absolute zero. Nothing would survive, not even your precious research data." Another tremor shook the outpost, stronger than those that had come before. Equipment crashed to the floor, and one of the guards stumbled, nearly dropping his weapon. Through their bond, Marcus could sense that the entities below the cold gods were growing impatient. The promise of harmony had calmed them temporarily, but Voss's continued presence and intentions were disturbing the fragile peace they had negotiated. "Director," one of the guards called urgently, "structural integrity of the outpost is failing. The drilling site reports critical energy fluctuations. We need to evacuate immediately." Voss ignored the warning, his attention fixed on Ilyara. "You will come with us," he said, his tone making it clear this was not a request. "Both of you. Our orbital facility is equipped with everything needed to study this remarkable symbiosis you've developed." "No," Ilyara said simply. Her voice carried new authority, resonant with power, drawn from the ice soul beneath them. "Your time on this world is ending, Director. The cold gods have spoken." As if in response to her words, the luminescent material surrounding them began to rise, forming a swirling vortex of blue-white energy that encircled Marcus and Ilyara. The temperature in the outpost plummeted instantly, dropping well below freezing in seconds. The guards' weapons frosted over, becoming useless in their hands. Voss's expression hardened. "Restrain them," he ordered sharply. "Chemical sedation protocols now." The guards attempted to comply, but the swirling energy made approach impossible. One particularly determined operative fired his weapon, despite the frost, a desperate shot that should have struck Marcus directly. Instead, the energy bolt was absorbed into the vortex, its power dissipated harmlessly. Through their bond, Marcus understood what was happening. The Ice Soul was responding to their unified call, manifesting physically, to protect its chosen representatives. They were becoming a focal point for the planet's awakening consciousness, a direct line to the entities that Ilyara called the Cold Gods. "This is your final warning, Voss," Marcus called over the rising sound of the energy vortex. "Leave Nevaeus 9. Tell Zephycorp that this planet is off-limits. If you continue your operations here, the consequences will extend far beyond this world." Voss's face contorted with rage. "Zephycorp doesn't respond to threats, Captain," he spat. "We take what we want." He drew a sidearm from within his coat, not a standard energy weapon, but something more ominous. Marcus recognized it immediately, a prototype quantum destabilizer, designed to disrupt the molecular bonds of its target. Such weapons were prohibited under interstellar treaty precisely because of their horrific effects on living tissue. Time seemed to slow, as Voss raised the weapon, aiming not at Marcus, but at Ilyara. Through their bond, Marcus felt her acceptance, a guardian ready to die protecting the sacred ice. But alongside that acceptance was regret for the connection they would lose, the potential left unfulfilled. Marcus made his decision in a heartbeat. As Voss fired the quantum destabilizer, Marcus threw himself into the path of the shot, simultaneously drawing on the power flowing through their bond to create a barrier of intensely concentrated cold energy between them and the weapon's discharge. The resulting collision of energies was cataclysmic. The quantum destabilizer's beam struck Marcus's hastily erected cold barrier and rebounded, its destructive force amplified and redirected throughout the outpost. The walls shattered, the ceiling collapsed, and the floor gave way entirely, revealing the vast network of luminescent veins beneath. As the outpost disintegrated around them, Marcus and Ilyara remained protected within their vortex of ice soul energy. Through the swirling blue-white light, they watched as Voss and his security team were engulfed in the collapsing structure, disappearing from view as ice and metal crashed down. "The sleeping bag," Marcus gasped, suddenly remembering the thermal cocoon that had been in his pack. "It's lost." Ilyara turned to him, her crystalline eyes reflecting the luminescence surrounding them. "We are the sleeping bag now," she said softly. Warmth and cold in balance protecting each other. The vortex expanded, lifting them free of the outpost's ruins and into the storm-ravaged night of Nevaeus 9. The blizzard raged around them, but within their protective cocoon of energy, they remained untouched by its fury. Below them, the ice fields were transforming, the drilling operations machinery crushed beneath rising crystalline structures as the planet responded to the threat, sealing the wounds in its surface. Through their bond, Marcus sensed movement above the storm clouds, Voss's orbital facility preparing to launch weapons in a final, desperate attempt to claim what they had come for. But the cold gods were fully awake now, their consciousness extending beyond the planet's surface. The aurora that had so fascinated Marcus brightened suddenly, its cosmic dance accelerating as it formed a protective canopy over the entire region. When the orbital weapons fired, the aurora absorbed their energy, completely transforming their destructive force into a spectacular display of light and color. In response, tendrils of luminescent energy shot upward from the planet's surface, penetrating the clouds and striking the facility with precision. There was no explosion, no visible destruction. The orbiting station simply went dark, its systems completely disabled by the cold energy that now permeated its structure. "It's over," Marcus said, watching, as the disabled facility began to drift away from Nevaeh 9, carried by orbital mechanics beyond the planet's immediate sphere of influence. "No," Ilyara corrected gently. "It begins." She gestured toward the horizon, where the perpetual night of Nevaeh 9's polar region was giving way to the first hints of dawn. The storm was subsiding, the winds calming, as the cold gods settled back into harmonious slumber. But the planet was forever changed by its awakening, and so were they. The vortex of energy that had protected them gradually dissipated, lowering them gently onto a newly formed plateau of crystalline ice. As their feet touched the surface, the runic patterns on Marcus's skin flared briefly, then faded to subtle luminescent traceries that matched Ilyara's most delicate markings. "The bond stabilizes," she explained, sensing his question before he could voice it. "Not broken, but transformed. You are now connected to the Ice Soul as I am the first human to be granted this gift." "And what does that mean?" Marcus asked, looking out over the transformed landscape. Where Aurora Station had stood there was now only a glistening dome of ice preserving the structure within, but rendering it inaccessible. "It means you have a choice," Ilyara replied. "You can return to your kind, carry warning of what happened here, ensure that no other corporation makes Zephycorp's mistake. Or, she turned to him, her expression both hopeful and hesitant. "Or you can stay. Become a guardian alongside the remaining few of my kind. Help us protect the sacred ice from those who would harm it." It wasn't an easy choice. Despite the connection they now shared, despite the wonder he had experienced touching the consciousness of an entire living planet, Marcus knew that choosing to stay would mean leaving behind everything he had known. His life among humans, his identity as Marcus Hale, all would be transformed if he accepted this new path. Yet as the sun breached the horizon for the first time in 72 hours, casting golden light across the ice fields of Nevaeh 9, Marcus felt a certainty that transcended rational thought. This was where he belonged now, not as conqueror or exploiter, not even as observer, but as guardian of something precious and unique in the universe. "I'll stay," he said finally, "at least until we're certain Zephycorp won't return. After that, we'll see." Ilyara smiled, a gesture she had adapted from him through their bond. From a small pouch at her waist, she withdrew a crystal, unlike any Marcus had seen before. It was roughly the size and shape of a human palm, transparent but with swirling patterns of blue-white energy suspended within its structure, a miniature echo of the planet's luminescent veins. "A runestone," she explained, placing it in his hands. "Carved from the heart itself. It will help you focus your connection to the Ice Soul as you learn." As Marcus's fingers closed around the crystal, he felt the bond between them resonate in response. The runestone grew warm in his grasp, not melting, but adapting to his touch, connecting him more deeply to both Ilyara and the living consciousness of Nevaeh 9. "Human," she said, echoing her first words to him with a gentle humor that flowed through their bond. "You must let me into the sleeping bag too. The night is very cold." Marcus smiled, the memory of their first encounter, now a shared experience between them. "No need," he replied, gesturing toward the transformed landscape around them. "I think we've found something better." Together, they turned toward the crystal sanctum that had risen from the ruins of Outpost Beta, a structure not built, but grown from the living ice, its translucent walls pulsing with the same blue-white energy that now connected them both to the heart of Nevaeh 9. This would be their base as they worked to protect the planet from future incursions, to study the remarkable symbiosis they had pioneered, and perhaps to teach others the delicate balance between warmth and cold that had saved a world from destruction. As they walked toward their new home, the ice beneath their feet resonated with each step, recognizing them as its chosen guardians. Above, the aurora danced in complex patterns that Marcus could now read like a language, the cold gods communicating across the vast distances of space, spreading word of what had happened here. "They will come again," Ilyara said softly, her thoughts mingling with his through their bond. "Your kind is persistent in their pursuit of power." "Yes," Marcus agreed, feeling the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders. "But next time we'll be ready." He glanced back once at the distant horizon, where Aurora Station lay entombed in protective ice. The life he had known was behind him now, but ahead stretched something far more extraordinary, a partnership unlike any in human experience, a duty that transcended species and self-interest. The thermal sleeping bag that had started their journey together was gone, lost in the destruction of the outpost. But they had discovered a greater truth, that sometimes survival depends not on isolation, but on connection, not on hoarding warmth, but on sharing it. In the harshest environments and the coldest nights, it is what we give to each other that saves us in the end. As the sun climbed higher over the ice fields of Niveus 9, casting rainbow reflections through crystal formations that had not existed days before, Marcus felt a peace he had never known, not since before the wars that had haunted his dreams, perhaps not ever in his life. Through their bond, he sensed Ilyara's similar contentment, her joy at finding an ally who could bridge the gap between cold and warmth. The night was indeed very cold on Niveus 9, but together they had discovered that even in the deepest cold light, and life could flourish if only one was brave enough to open the sleeping bag and let another in.